Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabados of Delmer, together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com.
Oh, Rabbi, we're going into more of an intellectual conversation today. We have with us the director of the Albany Public Library, Scott Jarzombek. And welcome to the Jewish View. It's so nice to have you on the show.
What's the first question? We have to ask him what good books has he been reading lately?
Well, if we want to get personal. But I was just saying, we had your predecessor, Carol Nersinger, on, and you've been in this position maybe about a year?
10 months.
About a year.
About a year.
So, you know, it's great. How are you getting a handle on what you're doing? Is it everything, are you living the dream? Is it everything you thought it would be?
It is. You know, libraries are currently in a time of change. And there's a lot of new challenges.
Which are they?
You know, technology is, we're really dealing with technology as a format now. You know, we went from scrolls to papyrus to books to VHS and microfilm to DVDs, and now we have e-content. We have e-books and downloadable audiobooks. So we're kind of trying to find a balance of how much of physical format do we buy, how much e-content do we buy, and we just launched a new website yesterday. So, and we're really viewing that as our new digital branch because we're seeing that usage grow.
It's interesting. I know someone who runs a used bookstore. So I was a little concerned a few years ago, and I asked her, I says, you know, they're saying e-books and e-books, maybe you'll go out of business. No, she says, you know, it's a wonder for us, but it's great, but people just haven't jumped to e-books, you know, to just go down, like they want a physical book, which was good for her, but that's why I'm asking you that maybe that e-books isn't for the future. People just like holding on to a book.
We think e-book usage for consumers has plateaued. We think e-book usage for library users is actually going to grow, but we don't think the physical book is going anywhere. I can tell you I'm known as a technology person. I was hired by the library to be a computer instructor when I first started with APL. The 2 books that I'm reading right now are physical books. I don't do e-books. I do e-books when I travel. But usually that's the second book I bring with me.
It seems like most people are like that. It's interesting, the technology, but they still want to hold on. I'm also like that, so I don't know why it is.
And this is the second tour of duty you just mentioned. That you started your career here when you were at University of Albany, and then you started working on the technology part. You know, you were in charge of the first computer system at the library?
I was in charge of the first computer. I was in charge of a computer lab at the Howe branch of the Albany Public Library, which is down in the south end of Albany. It's in front of the Schuyler Mansion. And I was hired as a grant employee to get a computer lab up there up and running and to start doing computer instruction and kind of daytime one-on-one instruction.
And this is after your career as a as a musician, I should say, as a hardcore punk rocker.
While doing all that.
Oh, while doing all that.
You know, during the day I'd go to the library and teach my computer classes, and then at night I'd either be in a band and sometimes directly walk out of the library, get in a van, and drive and play a show.
It's a very interesting juxtaposition. If you would say musician, you wouldn't say, well, where does he hang out? You know, like you say,
the library.
You know.
The library. But honestly, if you go to any of our locations, I can almost promise that we have a staff member who's a musician. Our head of adult services here, who does an incredible amount of programming, she's a musician. One of our library clerks is a great rock and roll and jazz drummer.
And what did you play?
I played bass and mostly yelled a lot.
Yelled a lot.
I yelled a lot.
You say it's not singing punk rock.
It's not really singing, it was yelling. But it was yelling with a message. You know, what's beautiful about punk rock is there's really a social message in it. And we talked about, you know, things that we were dealing with at that time.
Who was your idol growing up? Oh, God. In the punk rock thing? Was it Nirvana?
No, I would say growing up in punk rock was a lot of the New York bands from the late 80s who were preaching a message of not drinking, not smoking.
Like what artist?
Oh, God, a band called Judge is one of the bands that comes to mind, who were really about living a clean lifestyle but reacting to the drug and drinking atmosphere.
And they played in the East Village?
Yeah, they played CBGBs. You know, they played the typical punk clubs that you would imagine in New York City.
So you cried a little in CBGB's clothes?
A little. I played there a bunch of times, and it was upsetting because a good chunk of my teenage years was gone. And, you know, for us, we lived down on the eastern end of Long Island. It was an hour and a half train ride.
Right.
We get on the train, and we were basically living on the, you know, we were on the train for sometimes sleeping at Penn Station to catch the train in the morning because we wanted to get to those shows.
I really don't know anything about punk rock, but once you say that, it's clean. So a lot of times they say that some of these bands, maybe it's a different venue, or like really, I mean, like that, they hate the Police.
Well, the Police is a punk band, right?
Yeah, well, it's sort of a good rock band.
Very good rock band.
Well, you know, there's a lot of in punk rock. It's really, and you'll find a lot of my peers now are in the same position as me. They're lawyers and they're doctors and they're doing really positive things. But I have a lot of friends. My sister's a lawyer though. But they're doing a lot of things in society. They rebelled against society in their youth, and then all of a sudden, I always joke. I always thought the world would be over by now, but it's not. So now we have to, I still see all those things I was upset about, and I want to change them. And as an adult, I'm empowered to change them, and I think the library is a great vehicle for
Now,
that.
you're also a skateboarder.
Formerly, my knees can't do skateboarding anymore.
No more?
No more, no more. I'll push around when my kids are riding their bikes, but no tricks, no steps or things like that.
How can you feel like you can change things on that last note that you were saying with the library? To getting more kids to read, that's what I would, getting more kids to be educated through libraries.
Getting more kids to read, but also getting more adults to read. To me, libraries have always been about access to information, from Alexandria to the Albany Public Library today, and it's one of our, it's our motto. We're here to empower and educate, and I think libraries do that. I think everybody should have the same place on the starting line, and I think a library is a great base in society. It's a cultural institution in society that at least gives everybody that same starting line to start from.
Well, you're totally right. I mean, I totally agree. I think everybody would, public libraries, they like that. You don't have to be rich, poor, it's like, but how do you get kids motivated to read? I mean, my kids read a lot, so it's not, but I just always feel society that, Mark and I have so many people on the show, and one of them's the schools, and there's like 50% dropout, I mean, that obviously means they don't want to be educated beyond 9th, 10th grade. I mean, so I feel, because the Lubavitch always emphasized education. He was the one who pushed, there used to be health, education, and welfare. He says education is that important that it should have its own office, and they did eventually. We know there is an education cabinet, but again, the resources are there. I mean, the books are there. How do you get motivated? Do you have any programs to bring kids in?
Well, we do. We have tons of programs. We have 7 locations in the city, and there's a children's and a teen program going on almost every day in the city. And excellent. Plus, you have the teens coming in for just a space. For me, I view it as we need to create recreational readers. The schools do, a list, a school list, and oh God, I got to read this book. Let me find the thinnest book that I can find. The reality of it is we want our staff and the public do an incredible job of getting readers to read books they like, and not just children, but adults. I couldn't read until 1st grade. The only reason I had a learning disability right off,
What was it?
I have like a math dyslexia and a grammar dyslexia. It's the best way to explain it. I can't pronounce the words that they are. So I had no interest in reading. I had no interest in school, except for social studies. But it was comic books. And my grandmother said to me, I'm not reading G.I. Joe to you anymore. You got to learn to read on your own. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I want to read for fun, not because the teacher's telling me I have to read. And oddly enough, a few years later, my public library had a comic book club, had a comic book program. And that, I went to story times when I was young, and I did summer reading when I was young. But it was that comic book club drawing me back in 4th and 5th grade that got me back in the library, and just you're surrounded by books, and you're surrounded by people who don't just want you to read because you have to read, but want you to enjoy what you're reading. And I think that's what's important and motivating.
Are you a collector of comic books?
I was, but then as foolishly sold them off to,
You did.
to replace skateboards that I would constantly break.
Well, because the head of the Jewish Federation of Northeastern New York, Rob Kovach, is a collector of comic books. And 2 points. One is when he first got married, his wife said, either the comic books go or I go, and he didn't give up the comic books and she stayed. He called her bluff.
Yeah.
So in the bedroom, they still have
the comic books.
all these comic books from 45 years or whatever,
Probably
collecting. And he
Probably.
knows, and he has them in plastic, and he knows exactly where they are. He has them cataloged. But then he talked about how Superman and Batman and Hawkman are all are derived from Jewish culture, and
Really?
and yeah, like Superman is Moses, and so where Moses was. You ever hear the story from him? Where Moses was thrown, set afloat down the Nile. Superman was set afloat through the rocket ship off of Krypton to come here. Moses was picked up by the Egyptians, and just like Superman was picked up by the Kent family, and then Superman had a secret identity. Moses had the secret identity, and then he came forward, and it was sort of this parallel of where they had to live and how they had to get along with the secret identity.
But you know, Scott, I know that I have a
Thought
friend.
I'd tell you
Great,
this.
that's
It's
a great, it's a great connection.
And you should have Rob here at a comic book seminar, because he does go around and give talks.
Really, I would love to have that happen.
I'm sure you would, and you'd be right there in the front row
I
of the
would
audience.
be in the front row. Yes, of course I would.
But you know, Scott, what you're saying is very interesting, because I have a friend who has a PhD in education, won actually the Buffalo Teacher of the Year. But he used to he'd go into the hardcore areas, the inner city, and he'd say, well, they couldn't read. But then he'd ask them for the baseball averages and figuring out baseball.
Of course.
He says, wait a minute. I remember he was telling that, wait a minute. These kids aren't stupid. If they could figure out that, if you could just relate to the baseball averages, like you say, if you need to read a comic book, I mean, like you say, there's a theme there. There's an idea behind it. It's like a story. So there's pictures in it. It's not. If you can relate to the kids, that'd be great.
If you don't make educational fun, if you don't create an internal desire for education, a significant portion of the kids in our community aren't going to involve themselves in it. Yeah. And baseball is a great analogy. I'm horrible with math, but I got very good with statistics. Why? Because baseball. I love baseball. Yeah. So it's what draws our interest and makes us who we are and what we've followed up on in our learning.
Well, Jewish people are called the people of the book, but I'm a teacher. One of my 10 jobs, like I say, of teaching children. But that really it's probably one of our biggest issues also. You can bring a kid to school and have their parents sign up, but are you going to motivate them? And if they're not motivated, sooner or later, they're not going to learn, they're not going to be involved. So it's like, say, just bring it down to their level where they're interested, and it's very, very important.
I wanted to ask you, Holly McKenna is the president
of the foundation.
Of the foundation.
Yes.
But she had said that you are cutting edge, you moving ahead and reshaping the image of the libraries, and that's what they were looking for, and they found that in you when they hired you. Cutting edge. I mean, what are you seeing the next phase of the library being? I
think what we've been for a very long time is. There was just a Siena poll that came out that talked about 20 to 30% of African American and Hispanic upstate residents use the library primarily for their connectivity to the internet. And I believe that's a growing role in what we do, and it goes beyond our building. In other words, New York Public Library has a wonderful model program going on where they lend out MiFi. So you can actually come to the library, borrow a piece of equipment, go home and have Wi-Fi in your house for as long as you borrow it. And I think it's part of our job to make sure people have access to the internet. And I think that's one of the cutting edge things that we're looking at. People continue to come to our building. That's one of our metrics that's rising.
But people that's not cutting edge.
But how they interact when they come here is what's cutting edge. We just created Albany Made, which is a makerspace that has a 3D printer, but it also has a screen printing press, and we're going to be doing classes there that'll really teach people. We used to just teach people how to get on the internet. We used to just do book clubs and teach people how to knit. Well, guess what? Now it's our job to teach people how to use 3D printers and how to screen print.
Yeah. Okay,
and I think that's the information that we now have to share with the public.
Yeah, I know Bethlehem Library has a 3D printer, and it's huge for them.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I don't know who knows about you having the 3D printer, and do you only have just the one in the main branch?
We just have one right now. Yes.
Now, also in the main branch, you just set aside some quiet rooms, which I got to tell you, I've been on your predecessor's back a little bit to get them, because I go to the Bach branch and I've gone to the Pine Hills branch, and they have quiet rooms and it's wonderful. And then I come here and I want a few minutes alone time, and I can't. You know, it's really, I'm talking to someone and I'm in an open area.
Yes.
So on the second floor, you just opened up a few quiet rooms, I'm told. So.
Yes, and that's part of the idea of the library as the third place. It's not your job, it's not work, it's not home. It's a community-centered place where people can do numerous things, from learning to just spending quiet, self-reflecting time. We had that at all of our other locations, and we didn't have it here. So when we started doing some new construction, I thought, well, why don't we just section off some of these smaller rooms? Instead of making them offices, let's make them study rooms, because this was the only location that didn't have study rooms. And to me, study rooms, I don't really like calling them study rooms. That's just kind of the traditional phrasing.
That's why I like quiet rooms.
Quiet rooms, or I view it as, and there was a great article in Fast Company that talked about how libraries are growing in being the people's office.
Yeah.
I've seen companies start and flourish in the public library.
Really? That's interesting.
And I think I don't really say we're incubators, but I do say we're greenhouses.
Yeah.
Because when I put my seedlings in a greenhouse, it's for a couple months for them to grow before I put them out in my garden. And I think that's what libraries do. I think we're that greenhouse. People come here, they do research, they get information, they learn skills, and that gets that seed to start growing before it's put out.
That's excellent. I didn't even know that. You know, you think of someone getting ready for medical school, they come to a library, but not just for a business.
And a public library, we see it at all across. I mean, the libraries I've been at and here, a lot of small businesses starting out of the public library.
I wanted to ask you, because on a personal note, because 1987 was a very tough year for you. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, and it does connect into kind of what I'm doing today, and probably why I got into punk rock. My father, who just was, he was actually just put in the New York State Stock Car Racing Hall of Fame in Saratoga. He raced Whelen Modifieds, which is, I always kind of equate it to like minor league baseball for the big, racing that you see on television. And he lost his life racing.
Really?
So, and you were 11.
And I was 11. And besides the Mets winning the World Series, that September before, that was a very rough year for me. And that's when I got into punk rock and I got into skateboarding, but it's also when I really started using the public library a lot more, because I didn't feel comfortable at home and was a little lost. And the library was one of those institutions in the community that no one asked me anything when I walked in the door. There was no adult breathing down my neck. I could just kind of go to the 900s, sit on my skateboard, flip through history books, and kind of be in my own little world for a while. And I always credit that with kind of putting me in a good path in my education.
Yeah, that's why I asked you about it, because I wanted you to reflect on that a little bit for us. This is not a crying moment.
No.
And, but I just,
I do also.
It's not an Oprah thing here.
Yes, I know. It's, and I also, but I do, my father was a blue collar, he drove a truck, he was a welder, a race car driver, wore cowboy boots, but he read.
Yes.
And that's how I was interested in reading. And he was huge into history. And history is a major passion for myself and my sister. And I always talk about that when people say, oh, well, I'm not from, my parents aren't big into education, or, how do I get my kids into education when I have a more hands-on job? And I say, my father really put me on a path towards the academic. I mean, so did my mother. My mother deserves a ton of praise. But he was making us watch The World at War.
Yeah.
You know, and he was reading these history books, and that really was a huge influence on me.
That's also, I mean, it's an important factor of how much parents, again, you know, as a rabbi, you look at a full scale of things like, I say, education in the school, trying to keep families together. So that's, I mean, that just goes kudos to your parents that they taught them how to read. So many kids just, they don't see it. And they're watching TV at night. And
it's modeling as well. It's not just about reading to your child, which I do, and my wife does, but it's also showing that this is a normal part of life. You read. You know, I will sit while my kids are playing with their Legos, I'll sit with a book in my hand. And my mother does that all the time as well, and my grandmother. And it's just books and reading are a normal function of life. And I think that gets in a child's brain, modeling reading the newspaper. My sister learned, you know, was a very bright woman. She learned to read, one of the first things she read out loud was from my pop-ups and newspaper. So it's just modeling the fact that people read, people educate themselves.
Yeah, that's very important. You know, just going on to the future, I mean, like Mark said, we saw, because our Jewish neighborhood was right near the Bach Library, so, you know, so before your time, you know, you're here for, what, about a year, you say?
About a year, yes.
A year that they remodeled or actually torn down, let alone remodeled, literally libraries and built up new libraries. Is there any more for, I mean, the main library is still here. I mean, it's a good building. Is there any projection for the long run about remodeling or refitting these libraries?
You know, we've actually changed the name to the Washington Avenue branch. The first thing we want to do is change the library culturally. And we want to reflect the branch model a little bit more than a main center research library, because we think that's what the people want. Second, we've redone
it's
carpeting.
Like a neighborhood library.
It is like a neighborhood library. We've redone the carpeting. We've moved all the adult staff to the first floor, so if you're looking for a book, we're right there to help you. And then we've expanded the children's room, and there's some other things we're thinking about doing in the future.
Well, I like that secondary reference desks in the back, towards the back of the library. It's very accessible. I like that idea.
Yeah, and I got to work it the other day just for a couple minutes, and it was fun. Yeah. And I think my staff are excellent here, and I think my staff really enjoy the increased connection with the public.
Well, do you monitor how many people come into the main? Yes. I'll still call it the main branch.
You can call it whatever you want. Yes.
But is there an increase in the past 10 months?
I would say there's definitely an increase in the past 10 months.
Okay.
There's definitely been more people coming in the door. And we've kind of tried to change the culture here so the people who are coming in the door are coming to use the library as a library. And we're
not as a rest stop.
Not as a rest stop, not as a place to hang out in before they catch the bus. We're really, and we've been told there's been some appreciation from the public.
All right. Now, when you opened up the North Albany branch in 2005.
Yes.
That's in the YMCA.
Yes.
You have a branch in there. And were you the branch librarian?
I was the branch librarian there for about a year.
Okay.
Yes.
And how was in the past 10 years, how have the libraries changed? Ooh. Because, I mean, computers are faster, but certainly in the past 10 years prior to 2005, it was a bigger change in computers than there was in the past 10 years. So, you know what I mean? From 95 to 2005,
they're getting smaller.
It was a bigger, and they're getting faster. More powerful. And
one thing that we have seen in the last 5 years is people bringing their own device.
Yeah.
And that's if you walk through the first floor here, we've increased the seating, but we've made the smaller tables, and we've made tables that are closer to places to plug in.
Right.
Because that's really a service that has grown and grown. We've seen our Wi-Fi numbers double.
Oh, wow.
Because people are bringing their own devices. Yeah. And, you know, we've seen kind of computer usage flatten out because will always be people in the community who either their device is broken or they can't afford a device, so they need to come to us. Right. We know that's a big role of ours. But those handheld devices...
You're talking about me over here.
Those handheld devices are, you know, inexpensive and people can afford them, but they can't necessarily afford the connection at home.
Right.
Well, you know, Mark and I really have to say, first of all, we should have said right at the beginning, appreciate the Albany Library, because you say here, I don't know if our viewers really realize that we are broadcasting from the main branch, what did I say, the Washington
Avenue branch.
Washington Avenue branch of the Public Library, so
Yes.
we really should say thank you
Yes.
to yourself and to the whole staff and the whole library system that allow us to use the facilities here.
And this is part of the future. You know, when you ask me what's the future, I talk about content creation. The libraries across the country have been taking part in creating content, putting it on YouTube, and that's, I think, one of the things that we're going to be doing is helping people create their own content, being a channel for that content, and also creating the content itself.
And I wanted to, so are you going to be doing a show possibly? I mean,
I don't know
do you
if I'm
think
gonna-
that you could do?
I don't know if right now I'm doing a blog with the TU.
Right.
I don't know if I have
You
time
could do a
to do
TV
a
show.
I would love to do, I'm a huge fan of podcasts.
Uh-huh.
So we always joke about doing an Albany Public Library podcast, or we plan to do an Albany Public
Well,
Library
if you need
podcast.
someone to help you, I mean, I'm
We
here.
may,
We've
we
been
may.
doing, we had 200 episodes of the Jewish View,
Really?
so
That's
we've
excellent.
been in a year and a half, so we could certainly be of assistance.
You might be, you might be.
So I wanted to, what was your toughest challenge being a librarian? Because you also dealt with, in Westchester and Dutchess counties, you were involved with 3 or 4 library systems there in various capacities. So what's been your biggest challenge?
You know, besides, I kind of feel like libraries are underestimated, how much of an impact we have on the community.
Yeah.
So as a director, that's a huge challenge to get people to realize what we add to the local economy, what we add to the local educational infrastructure, and what we add to just the benefit of the community, literally the community that's within walking distance
That's your biggest
of our
challenge?
facilities. Yes, there are people there who think, every library I've worked at, I've been in a rural library, I've been in an urban library, and I've been in a wealthy community.
Right.
And you almost, in all of those communities, there is an undercurrent of, we don't need libraries anymore, or why do we need libraries? Or libraries are less important than they were 20 years ago. And that's just been, I think that's a fight we've been fighting for a long time now. And I would hate to see what our community here would look like without the public libraries.
Sure. Oh.
Well, talk about numbers. What about the budget? And are they, because of that, maybe because the idea, oh, why should we give them more money, you know, or instead of, hey, this is an incredible.
What's your operating budget?
Yeah.
We operate at about 6.5
Million.
A million,
With
yes.
7 branches.
With 7 branches, yes.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky. We had a director and a board that was forward-thinking, and we became a school district. This was in 2006. We became a school district library, which means that we are the masters of our own budget. We don't have to go to the city holding our hat saying, "Can you please give us more to operate?" And I think it's very democratic because our budget goes out to the voter.
Right, but you say a school district budget, so, but the school districts have their own budget.
They have their own budget, but they collect for us. There are, they call them school district libraries because the library fits within the same service area as the school district, so therefore the school district acts as our collecting agent.
Administers the money and
Yes.
invests.
So when you
does
want-
We
the
invest,
money,
they just collect it for us.
and then give you the money, and,
Yes.
and when you cut the checks for the employees and things
It's
like
from
that.
us.
Yeah, but when you want an increase, so you go directly to the
We
voters?
go to the public voters, yes. We have a public vote May 19th.
Okay.
And the voters will be making the decision. We're staying under the cap. It's 1.65%.
You have a cap too? It's like a school, you mean?
Like everybody, yes. Any taxing entity in the state of New York has
That
the
cap, I
cap.
didn't know
So,
that.
so what's the budget, proposed budget total?
Oh God, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it'll be an extra $140,000.
Oh, okay.
So
that's not.
I mean,
so much.
it's covering the increase in the cost of living for the library.
Inflation,
Yeah.
just
Sure.
2%.
What do you see as the? What will the library look like 3 years from now, or 5 years from now?
3 years from now, you probably will see less books. I don't think
fewer
books.
excuse me,
Fewer
books.
Fewer books. Thank you.
Let's do the grammar.
Yes,
for it,
do
okay.
the grammar correctly. You probably will see fewer books. You will see more space, smaller spaces for the public to meet. It'll be a community. It'll look more like a community center. Okay. I think you'll see less computers tethered to the wall, and you'll see laptops being borrowed within the building and tablets being borrowed within the building. And I think you'll also see staff interact with the public more. We won't be tied to the desk.
I know what I want to ask you. When you have a school librarian, that's not a librarian that's under the auspices of the Albany Public Library.
No. They're paid for by the district.
By the school district.
Yes.
Okay, so do you think that you can interact, or that there could be a shared services with having a school librarian and then working here at the Albany Public Library
that
system?
Model's been explored and because of union and because of certification, it's tough.
It is.
It's tough. Our New Scotland branch, which became our Bach branch, was inside School 19,
right, yes.
And I was there on and off doing story times and helping out after school, and it's a tough balance.
Well, it's a balance because of strangers interacting with children and having a separate entrance and controlling these strangers from getting into the school building and having an issue with too close contact with students.
Exactly, and there's it's with the school library, it's all day long. Kids are in and out and doing studying and programming, and there's a lot of teaching going on in school libraries. So I mean, like I said, that's a model that's been explored, and also our children's librarians are often going to the schools and doing story times, promoting summer reading. And we have a lot of the Head Start groups and a lot of the pre-K groups are actually taking field trips almost on a weekly basis to the libraries, and there's story times and library time done then.
Well, thanks a lot.
Mark, we're out of time, unfortunately, but you're always around.
So anytime you want to have me back,
so thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're doing great work in the year that you're doing,
Thank
and we're
you.
looking forward to good things in the future.
Great.
Much success.
Thank you very much for having me.